Today, in What the Heck Is That in the new Dungeons & Dragons movie, we have one of the most iconic Dungeons & Dragons creatures. It has been in adventures and confounding players since the inception of the game. They adorn dice trays and plushies and every bit of D&D lore and merch, birthing the line, sometimes a chest is just a chest, but don't bet on it. Today we are going to arm you with more info on the Mimic than even we knew existed. You will be a certified steely-eyed missile man by the time we are done. Your friends and loved ones will be amazed at the plethora of Mimic knowledge you've now obtained. Enough for a PhD on Mimicology. We will even weave in a tale about one of the biggest Mimics and one-shots that almost took out an entire town. So without further bullshittery, let's begin. Mimics are predators that assume the form of just about any object in order to attract prey. Mimics occupy a volume of approximately 15 cubic feet. They could assume any shape provided they retain the same volume. In order to most effectively lure adventurers, they most commonly took the shape of doors, chests, and other objects likely to be touched. Their skin texture and color could change to almost perfectly resemble wood, stone, metal, and other basic materials. Though the natural state of a mimic's skin was a rough speckled gray similar to granite. Mimics had no concern beyond surviving and acquiring food. Although some intelligent varieties of mimics were capable of basic communication, they had no culture, no moral code, and no interest in religion. More aggressive mimics could not be reasoned with in any capacity. Much like government workers, mimics were capable of altering the pigmentation and texture of their skins by pumping a brown pigmented fluid from internal muscle organs through surface capillary vessels. This is going to get in depth here. All right. While the pigment granted them the appearance of wood, the capillaries themselves granted an appearance of wood grain. This fluid could be more readily seen in wounded mimics. Their skins were covered with light-sensitive sensors that could detect heat out to a range of 90 feet. These sensors were quickly overwhelmed when exposed to bright lights and could potentially even be rendered blind. Mimics hunted by standing perfectly still until a creature came into contact with them. They then attacked their victim by using a powerful adhesive secretion to trap them, while also employing their strong pseudopods to attack and further restrain their creature's movements. The adhesive, which was also a mimic's main means of locomotion, could be weakened by the application of alcohol over a few seconds. It was completely neutralized less than a minute after the mimic's death. So always be packing a flask, or 2, or 3, or 4, if you're an alcoholic. Although mimics were usually solitary hunters, they often shared their vast territories with other species. A meal of 1 or 2 humanoids could sustain a mimic for several weeks. They reproduced by splitting, growing to adulthood within a few years. There were several subspecies of mimics roughly divided into 2 groups, a larger, more aggressive and less intelligent variant known as killer mimics, and a smaller, more cunning variant known as common mimic that was capable of language and more refined combat tactics. Mimics of the second variety could disguise themselves as more ornate furnishings and were capable of negotiating and bargaining. They spoke their own language as well as languages of nearby communities. Intelligent mimics were known to sometimes offer information or safe passage through their territory in exchange for food. More rare were the book mimics, bred in secret by the Church of Agma since the mid-12th century Dale Reckoning. Book mimics were bred to envelop a book and protect it from moisture, flame, or physical damage, taking a small amount of blood from readers if no other food was to be had. Most book mimics were as smart as an unschooled human. Rarely mimics would establish large colonies, within which they could communicate telepathically with each other and with other mimics. Juvenile mimics born in a colony retained their telepathic abilities even away from their homes. The skin of a mimic could be used as an ingredient for making polymorph self potions. Their adhesive secretions could also be sold to alchemists, and their internal organs could be used in the production of food or perfume, and some cultures considered mimic organs tasty delicacies. So they were hunted. Most sages agree that mimics were artificially created by wizards to serve as protectors against treasure hunters. However, some speculate they originated in the far realm. That seems to be the go-to for the weird and outlandish is definitely the far realm. Sometime in the 14th century DR, a mimic assumed the form of a statue in a busy market square in Waterdeep. It remained undetected for 2 years, feeding off stray animals and homeless humans and disposing of their bodies in a nearby sewer. The disappearances prompted an investigation that led to the death of 2 members of the City Watch who prodded the statue. A somewhat similar incident was described in the Adventures of Grin, Richard and Richard and Woo-wee, that took place sometime before 1372 DR. A naive and overly ambitious group of young adventurers got lost in search of a dungeon to plunder somewhere in the wilderness, and after camping overnight discover a tower just outside their tents. The youths rush inside, eager for the adventure, only to find nothing but a bone-chilling realization they were inside a great hungry mimic. Now, that brings us to our one-shot, and it was sold with the allure of a murder mystery inside a local tavern. I think you see where this is going. All the clientele were suspects, including the captain of the guard and a captain of a local fishing vessel. Many suspected the performing bard might be responsible for the deed. The tavern also housed a band of goblins that all worked for the tavern. To make a long story even longer, covert searching of rooms turned up many secret passages and more goblin trickery and overall shenanigans. There was even an iconic bar brawl to go with it. Eventually, in the end, despite most players using intelligence as a dump stat, the adventurers finally figured out that the killer was in fact the tavern itself. The mimic had found a steady diet of travelers and dump stat adventurers for eons by just letting the sole owner and her band of goblins run a business within. Now, if you're still here and stuck around for our class on Mimicology 101, I thank you. Thank you very much. See you soon.